Hello students, today we will take up a lesson from paper 6 Agricultural Economics. We are going to take up module 2 deals with agricultural development. Lecture that we are going to take up today, cropping pattern in India. Agriculture has been playing a very important role in our country. As we know, the economy is usually split up into three sectors while discussing the economic features of our country. We have agriculture, industry, and the tertiary or the service sector. All these sectors need to perform well in order that the economy achieves development. So when we talk about cropping pattern, we want to see how much of land is under various crops. If we use more for a particular activity, we have lesser for the others, and therefore cropping pattern becomes very important. So let us try to understand the factors that govern cropping pattern. Secondly, how cropping pattern is changing, how it is evolving in the country. By cropping pattern, we mean the proportion of area under different crops at a point of time. Changes in this distribution over a period of time and factors determining this change in distribution. So cropping pattern in India is determined mainly by natural factors like rainfall, climate, soil conditions, etc. However, technological factors have also become important. For example, consequent upon the adoption of new seeds, fertilizers and technology generally known as high yielding variety of seeds, in the mid 1960s, area under wheat increased significantly. In recent years, the government introduced various programs for increasing the production of oilseeds. As a result, area under oilseeds increased rapidly. Significant facts about the cropping pattern in India can be discussed. Number 1, food crops include cereals, millets, pulses, vegetables and fruits, and they cover 3/4 of the total cropped area. Of the total area under food grain, a large proportion is occupied by cereals. For instance, in 1950-51, out of a total area of 97.3 million hectares under food grain, as much as 78.2 million hectares, representing 80.4%, devoted to cereals. Of the total area of 121.3 million hectares under food grains, in 2009-10, the share of cereals was 98 million hectares, that is 80.8%. So this shows that the area under pulses was only about 18 to 19% of the total area under food grains, both in 1950-51 and 2009-10. Cereals constitute the main food, while pulses provide the nutrition. If we produce more of cereals, we can only use lesser of land to produce pulses, and this may cause some kind of an imbalance in the health of people. Secondly, rice is the most important food grain crop in India. In 1950-51, it was grown on 30.8 million hectares, which amounted to 31.6% of total area under food grains. This shows that rice is grown on more than 1/3 of the total area under food grains. In fact, area under rice has increased in almost all the states in recent years. This is on account of special rice production programs and rice technology having started yielding dividends after several years of research and extension. Thirdly, the second important food grain crop in India is wheat. In 1950-51, it was sown on 90.8 million hectares, that is about 10% of the area under food grains. However, it has consistently improved in position, particularly after the advent of green revolution during the mid-60s. In 2009-10, wheat was grown on 28.5 million hectares, which comes to 23.5% of the area under food grain. So, area under wheat has risen considerably in Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. The main cause of this expansion is the technological breakthrough achieved in wheat combined with the price support and market infrastructure. Fourthly, the case of coarse cereals is disappointing. The combined area under jawar, bajra, maize declined in percentage from 28.6% in 1950-51 to 20.4% in 2009-10, expressed as a percentage of the total area under food grains. You can see that increase in the other cereals has led to a decline cereals that are consumed by the poor people. So, this shows that if more of land is under wheat and rice, then only lesser of it can be available for coarse cereals like jawar, bajra. This will definitely affect the poorer sections of the society. High yielding variety can yield 3 to 7 times more than traditional varieties, but most of them are location specific and susceptible to pests and diseases. But on the whole, wherever research has taken place, for example, rice and wheat were concentrated upon by researchers, and these crops have increased, and therefore naturally the other crops have stood to lose out. Moreover, low rate of profit, low value status and restricted demand as they are produced and eaten by poor people restrict the absorption capacity of yield enhancing high cost inputs. Coarse cereals also face competition from superior cereals like rice and wheat, which in some areas are available at prices lower than that of coarse cereals. Because of high productivity in the high yielding variety of seeds, elite oriented cereals cost lesser than the traditional cereals or the cereals used by the poorer sections, and therefore the coarse cereals would not become attractive for people to purchase. As a consequence of all these factors, area under coarse cereals in most of the states either were stagnant or decreased significantly. Fifthly, area under oilseeds was 10.7 million hectares in 1950-51 and 19 million hectares in 1985-86. To meet the domestic requirements of edible oil, the government has to import considerable quantities of oil seeds in the early 1980s, and to achieve self-sufficiency in edible oil, the government launched a number of programs in 1980s, National Oilseeds Development Project, NODP it is called, in 1985-86, Technology Mission on Oilseeds TMO in May 1986, and Oilseeds Production Trust Program OPTP in 1987-88. As a result of these programs, area under oilseeds increased rapidly from 19 million hectares in 1985-86 to 26.2 million hectares in 1998-99. Therefore, it started falling, and in 2003-04 area under oilseeds was 23.7 million hectares. However, in 2009-10 area under oilseeds stood at 26.1 million hectares. Sixthly, commercial crops, we find that the area under sugarcane increased from 1.7 million hectares in 1950-51 to 2.8 million hectares in 1995-96 and 4.2 million hectares in 2009-10. Area under cotton rose from 5.9 million hectares in 1950-51 to 10.3 million hectares in 2009-10. The area under jute increased from 0.6 million hectares in 1950-51 to 0.9 million hectares in 2009-10. The cropping pattern in India has undergone significant changes during the period of planning, particularly during the last 4 decades. First, with the introduction of new technology during the mid-60s, and under wheat, land has increased both in absolute and relative terms. Second, area under coarse grains and pulses has considerably shrunk. Thirdly, with the launching of the technology mission of oilseeds during mid-80s, the area under oilseeds expanded significantly. In fact, from mid-1980s to early 1990s, there was a marked shift in the favor of oilseeds as the presence of edible oil by 1990. For this purpose, domestic market prices of oilseeds were subsequently pushed up. India achieved a position of near self-sufficiency in edible oil by 1992-93, when its imports of edible oils came down to almost a fraction of what they were in the mid-80s. So during this period, about 7 million hectares of additional area came under oilseeds, partly from kharif fallows, partly from crop intensification, and substantial portion through crop substitution. The shift was largely from coarse cereals, but in some pockets even pulses and wheat gave way to oilseeds. With the purpose of achieving a better crop balance and tapping the export markets, increasing attention is now being focused on horticulture crops, which include fruits, vegetables, spices, floriculture, coconut, cashew nut, etc. So with this end in view, reliable data based on these crops is being prepared, and adoption of new technology is being encouraged, and incentives to promote private investment in high-tech horticulture are being provided. Since the shelf life of fruits and vegetables is very short, generally between 1 week to 3 months, development of horticulture is possible only if food processing is paid adequate attention. With this in view, the Ministry of Food Processing is setting up food parks in different parts of the country. The idea behind setting up a food park is to enable small and medium enterprises find access to capital intensive facilities such as cold storage, warehouse, quality control laboratories, effluent treatment plants, etc. So what we find is here that the cropping pattern changes so drastically that initially we found that most of the crop was under food crops. Most of the land was under food crops. Now when you find that government is giving incentives for non-food crops also to be grown, and they try to increase exports of goods to raise more of foreign exchange, then you find that this has also contributed to a change in land use, and therefore the cropping pattern has gone in favor of non-food crops. This may have some effects on society. It is bound to have effects on the society and the consumption pattern of people. Physical characteristics of natural endowments of a region and are the most important factors determining its cropping pattern. Some of the important reasons are natural factors. Nature of soil, type of climate, extent of rainfall, etc. will determine the basic cropping pattern of a region over a period of time. For example, in areas having sufficient rainfall and water logging, the most appropriate crop is rice, since it can withstand water. This explains the cultivation of rice in West Bengal. In areas having low rainfall and small availability of water supply, the choice will be naturally jawar and bajra, which require small quantities of water. Therefore, in Rajasthan and rain deficient areas in Uttar Pradesh, the basic crops are jawar and bajra. Similarly, the soil of the Indo-Gangetic plain is suitable for growing wheat. The next important factors, economic factors also play a role. So, these pertain to prices of agricultural commodities, incomes of the farmers, size of holdings, availability of agricultural inputs, nature of land tenure, etc. The importance of these factors in affecting the cropping pattern is self-evident. For example, increase in the price of a certain crop consistently for some years relative to other crops can induce the farmers to shift to that crop. For instance, farmers grow pulses and inferior cereals like jawar, bajra and maize have been tempted to shift over to the production of wheat in recent years on account of price factors and also on account of higher productivity potential of new high yielding variety of wheat. The size of farm holdings also affects the cropping pattern. Small farmers give first priority to food crops because they are more interested in fulfilling their food requirements in the first instance. As against this, large farmers with substantial holdings may tend to devote a part of their land for growing cash crops. Availability of agricultural inputs like seeds, fertilizers, irrigation, etc. also affect the cropping pattern to some extent. Third is the historical factors. In certain areas, certain crops are grown by sheer accident or necessity, and then that cropping pattern is maintained through years. Historical pattern of land tenure also plays a role. If the land is divided into a number of small plots with ownership vested in numerous small and marginal farmers, as against this, if ownership of land is vested in large land owners as under zamindari, the tendency will be to produce more cash crops. Fourth is social factors. Social environment, customs, traditions, outlook towards material things, etc. also influence crop pattern to some extent. For example, in the pre-independence period, the outlook of a majority of farmers was very narrow and they were bound by traditions. Therefore, the same cropping pattern was continued to be adopted by successive generations. After independence, gradually changes in social awareness and social consciousness are emerging, which are in turn making farmers more and more responsive to price changes and productivity possibilities of different crops. The next important factor is government policy. Policies of the government relate to different crops, exports, taxes, subsidies, supplies of inputs, availability of credit, etc. All these can also affect the cropping pattern significantly also in a way. In the pre-independence period, government policy had a very restricted scope to play in agriculture sector, and cropping pattern was determined exclusively by other factors. However, After independence, the policies and expansion of irrigation facilities, determination of agricultural prices like procurement prices, support prices, host of other policies have all contributed to changing cropping pattern. Adoption of high yielding variety of seeds in selected areas of the country with a package of inputs and incentives has contributed crucially in encouraging farmers of some region to switch over to wheat. So, this is how we find that there are various factors that have contributed to the cropping pattern in our country. Now, let us summarize what we have learned, try to have an understanding of what cropping pattern means, and we have then discussed about how cropping pattern has changed. Later on, we have taken up the factors that contribute to a change in cropping pattern, and we have also seen that the role of the government in changing cropping pattern for the better cannot be overlooked. The most important consideration in cropping pattern or in factors that affect cropping pattern we find is economic considerations. So, even in a country like India, which is dominated by farmers steeped in poverty and conservative, and where farmers hold tiny bits of land, cropping pattern can be changed through appropriate changes in the economic motive. Experience in recent years has been that the farmer does accept the logic for a change wherever he is shown a better cropping pattern. The real difficulty in adopting a better cropping pattern is that the farmer may not have the requisite capital to invest. So, it is here that the government may come to the help of the farmers. For self-assessment, the following questions can be attempted. Question number 1. What do you mean by the term cropping pattern? How is it important? Question number 2. What are the factors that contribute to changes in the cropping pattern? Number 3. According to you, what is the role that the government can play in bringing about an appropriate cropping pattern for the advantage of the economy? For references, the following books can be referred to. Number 1, Bill Grammy, 2000, An Introduction to Agricultural Economics, Himalaya Publication, Mumbai. The second book is Sandhu, A.N. and J. Singh, 2000, Agricultural Problems in India, 3rd edition, Himalaya Publishing House, Mumbai. The third book is Sundaram, I.S., 1999, Rural Development, 3rd edition, Himalaya Publishing House, Mumbai.